The sun had barely risen over the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush Mountains, yet Echo 7 was already moving. The air was thin, biting, and smelled faintly of dust and pine resin. Lieutenant Dawson led the SEAL team with practiced calm, his eyes scanning the horizon like a predator anticipating movement. What lay ahead was supposed to be routine: reconnaissance of a suspected insurgent communications relay point near the border, a mission the intelligence officers called highly probable, low risk. The team had been briefed extensively, maps laid out, satellite imagery analyzed, coordinates memorized. Every man had a checklist, every piece of equipment meticulously inspected. They moved with confidence like well-oiled parts of a machine. Yet Dawson's instincts, honed through years of deployments, whispered unease, a subtle tension in the air that he couldn't immediately place. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Virginia, Maya Trent sat in a dimly lit room at NSA headquarters, eyes fixed on a monitor glowing with a grid of signals and waveforms. At 29, she had long grown accustomed to the endless hum of intercepted chatter, the constant rhythm of military and civilian transmissions flowing like an invisible river around the globe. Most analysts treated these noises as background work, boring, repetitive, but Maya thrived in it. She had a knack for recognizing anomalies, subtle irregularities in static that most would overlook. At the same time, Echo 7 had begun moving through the mountainous passes. The valley beneath them stretched like a labyrinth of shadows, cliffs plunging hundreds of feet, rivers carving paths too treacherous to navigate without caution. The team advanced slowly, whispering coordinates into encrypted radios, their night vision goggles reflecting a faint green glow against the jagged stone. Dawson's mind was alert, scanning for ambushes, trap points, or any sign of movement. His team trusted him implicitly. They always had, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something about the terrain didn't add up. As they approached a narrow pass, an eerie silence settled over the mountains. No birds, no rustling of leaves, not even the distant roar of a river. They were isolated in a quiet that felt unnatural. Dawson raised a gloved hand, signaling the team to halt. Every operator froze, every sense heightened. Then came the first sign. A faint digital pulse, buried in the background static of their comms equipment, flickered across the radio channel. Back at NSA headquarters, Maya noticed the spike instantly. Her fingers paused mid-keystroke as she leaned closer, listening. The signal was weak, distorted, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. It was Echo 7, but their communication was fragmented, corrupted by something Maya had never seen before. She enhanced the waveform, isolating a faint pattern amid the chaos. And then she heard it, a rhythmic tap buried beneath the static. 3 short beats, a pause, one long. It was a code. Emergency code. "Something's wrong," she whispered, though no one in the room was listening. In the canyon, Echo 7 pressed forward despite the growing tension. The trail they followed had been marked in reconnaissance images as a minor path to the relay point, but the topography had shifted, rocks had fallen, and the route was less predictable than the satellites suggested. Their movement was careful, silent, almost ghost-like. Suddenly, an explosion of dust and rock erupted near their flank, a controlled detonation, but far too close to be accidental. Dawson dove instinctively, signaling the team to spread out. Gunfire erupted. Shadows moved faster than the eye could follow, armed figures appearing from hidden positions, trained and precise. The ambush was unlike any routine encounter the SEALs had faced. Dawson barked orders, teams splitting, countering, and maneuvering with surgical precision. But the attackers were well prepared, using the environment as a weapon: rock slides, narrow passages, and choke points designed to isolate and overwhelm. Inside the chaos, the team attempted to maintain communication, but the interference intensified. Every radio channel seemed jammed, scrambled beyond recognition. The digital pulse Maya had detected earlier fluctuated wildly, almost deliberately, cutting off Echo 7's ability to coordinate with command. The SEALs fought not only against physical enemies, but against technology designed to sever their lifeline. Miles away, Maya tracked the distortion with her specialized equipment, her intuition screaming at her that this was no ordinary failure. She cross-referenced the pattern with known insurgent jamming techniques and found a chilling match. Only a small, highly skilled militia operating deep in the region could execute such precise interference. Her hands moved over the keyboard, her mind racing to map the signals and predict their movement. Echo 7 was not lost to the wilderness or weather. They were being hunted. In the canyon, Dawson realized they had walked straight into a trap. The insurgents had lured them with false transmissions, manipulating every aspect of their mission. He assessed their options, noting escape routes, blind spots, and potential choke points. But each path seemed covered, and with the radio communications cut, reinforcements could not pinpoint their location. Then came the order that would change everything. Dawson tapped a metal buckle on his vest in a subtle, coded rhythm, 3 short, 1 long, the same pattern Maya had picked up from her monitors. It was the SEAL team's emergency signal, a hidden plea for help buried in the static. The message was almost lost among the chaos, but Maya's trained ears recognized it instantly. Dawson's eyes met the team's, silent understanding passing between them. They were relying on someone who could hear what no one else could. Maya, thousands of miles away, had heard, and now she had to act. The team moved deeper into the canyon, using shadows and terrain to evade immediate capture, but every step forward increased the risk. The mountains seemed to close around them, the wind whispering threats that could not be seen. Dawson kept tapping the code intermittently, a lifeline extended into the void. At NSA, Maya began decoding the signal, using every tool at her disposal: waveform analysis, pattern recognition, and cross-referencing historical insurgent tactics. Each click, each tap became a clue, a breadcrumb leading toward a truth no one else in the chain of command yet believed. Echo 7 was alive. They were behind enemy lines, trapped but not hopeless. By nightfall, the canyon was alive with movement. The insurgents patrolling, the SEALs hiding, the pulse of static echoing between the mountains. Maya, her eyes bloodshot from hours of monitoring, had reconstructed a partial map of their location. She whispered the coordinates to herself, testing each against her models, knowing that a single miscalculation could mean the difference between life and death. And as darkness fully descended, both hunter and hunted paused for a moment, a brief, tense lull. Somewhere in the middle of this chaos, an invisible connection had been made. A single analyst listening through the static and a SEAL team sending faint signals of survival now shared a silent understanding. Help was coming, but only if the signals could be followed. Part 1 ends with tension thick in the air. The mountains are quiet again, but the static tells a story of survival, trust, and the first sparks of hope. Echo 7 may be trapped, but they are not forgotten. And Maya Trent is about to prove that even behind miles of enemy territory and walls of interference, a single listener can change the outcome of a life-or-death mission. The canyon swallowed Echo 7, its jagged cliffs casting long shadows over the SEALs as they attempted to regroup. Lieutenant Dawson signaled for silence. Even a whisper could betray their location. Dust hung in the air, mixing with the acrid smell of spent gunpowder and the faint coppery scent of blood. Around him, the team assessed their injuries, scratches, bruises, one minor gunshot wound, but no one was panicking. Panic, Dawson knew, was more dangerous than the enemy itself. Hours earlier, the ambush had been sudden and merciless. The insurgents had anticipated every move. The SEALs had trained for ambushes, yet this one was unlike any simulation. They moved with a synchronized precision, using knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. Every turn in the canyon, every ridge, every rock seemed mapped out to trap Echo 7. Dawson realized with grim clarity they were being funneled toward a single endpoint. The mission that should have been routine had turned into a nightmare. Distantly, the faint rhythmic pulse continued, the coded taps Dawson had made with his vest buckle. It was almost imperceptible to the untrained ear, but it carried everything the team couldn't say aloud. It was a lifeline, a cry through the darkness. Somewhere far from these mountains, someone might hear it, and that someone had to act or the team would be lost forever. Thousands of miles away, Maya Trent leaned over her monitor, every nerve alert. The code she had picked up earlier repeated in the background static, and she replayed it obsessively, isolating the faint beats buried beneath interference. She knew immediately that this was not random. Echo 7 was sending a message. The thought that a SEAL team could communicate in real time while captured was staggering, but Maya had the skills to interpret it. Every detail mattered. Every beat was life or death. At NSA headquarters, the usual hum of computers and servers buzzed around her, but Maya felt utterly alone. Her colleagues had largely dismissed her warnings. The official stance was simple: temporary communication loss. Maybe Echo 7 was behind a rock formation, maybe it was a technical glitch, but Maya knew better. Her instincts had saved analysts and soldiers before. She knew the human element, the way someone would try to survive even when trapped. And she knew the team had survived the ambush. Back in the canyon, Dawson led his team through narrow passages between cliffs, each step calculated. The insurgents had retreated slightly, perhaps overconfident, perhaps regrouping. The SEALs used the lull to reposition, making sure they stayed in the shadows, moving silently over jagged rocks and loose gravel. Tors, the team's communications specialist, whispered coordinates, marking hidden trails for the others. Every footstep was a risk, every sound amplified by the canyon walls. They were being hunted, and they knew it. The insurgents were smarter than expected. Small squads appeared suddenly, flanking positions that should have been secure. Echo 7 had to make split-second decisions: engage, retreat, or remain hidden. Dawson's leadership was precise and calm, issuing short, crisp commands that minimized exposure. Yet, even with their experience, the team realized they couldn't fight their way out indefinitely. The terrain and the enemy's preparation left them with only one hope: someone outside the canyon listening, deciphering their code. Maya's hands were moving quickly across her console. She isolated every spike, every shift in the static, comparing it to archived signals from insurgent jamming systems. The patterns aligned with a small, well-trained militia known to operate in the region, experts in disrupting communications, manipulating terrain, and using local geography to their advantage. This wasn't random. The team hadn't wandered into danger. They had been deliberately drawn here. She cross-referenced the beats from Dawson's vest. Each tap had a purpose, a prearranged meaning. Maya decoded the first set: track, moving east, caution. The pulse wasn't just a signal, it was a trail marker. Somewhere within the interference there were coordinates, directions, possibly even escape routes. But extracting them required patience, precision, and nerves of steel. Maya had both, but time was not on her side. Meanwhile, Dawson considered the options available in the canyon. Retreating north meant encountering another cliffside ambush. Moving west could lead them into a ravine too narrow for extraction. Eastward was risky, but based on the team's observations and the subtle movements of their captors, it seemed the least dangerous. Dawson calculated quickly. The team needed to survive long enough for rescue forces to locate them. The odds were slim, but he had a plan: buy time, preserve the team, and communicate. The insurgents were not idle. They had noticed subtle shifts in Echo 7's movements and were adapting. Small patrols moved to cut off routes, signaling with hand gestures and whispered commands. The SEALs remained vigilant, using hand signals and nonverbal cues to maintain coordination. The rhythm of survival was constant: move, hide, observe, communicate. Every sound in the canyon could be a threat, every shadow a potential enemy. In her office, Maya felt the tension as if she were in the canyon herself. Her decoding software revealed more hidden signals, slight deviations in frequency caused by metal structures in the terrain. These were indirect communications, Echo 7's team using the environment to amplify their code. It was brilliant, desperate, and precise. Maya adjusted her filters, bringing the hidden patterns into clarity. For the first time, a map began to form, a virtual trail tracing the team's likely path through the mountains. Back in the field, Echo 7 made slow progress. Dawson signaled to halt when distant footsteps echoed off the cliffs. The team crouched in silence, hearts pounding, waiting. The enemy passed without detection, but the narrow escape left everyone shaken. Tors whispered an update. "They're using our last position to track us." Dawson nodded grimly. They had to stay ahead, stay invisible, and keep the pulse alive. Maya, now running simulations based on signal propagation, predicted a possible extraction point, a ravine where Echo 7 could signal without being intercepted. The calculations were intricate, blending physics, geography, and pattern analysis. She realized that the team's survival depended entirely on her next moves. One misstep could leave them stranded, or worse. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she refined coordinates, cross-referencing every weak signal. As night fell, the canyon became an even darker labyrinth. Shadows merged with the rocky terrain and temperatures plummeted. The SEALs relied on thermal vision, the faint glow of digital scopes illuminating the edges of cliffs and hidden paths. Dawson led the team carefully, marking subtle signs for future reference. Each member moved with controlled urgency, their trust in one another absolute. Every step was critical, every misjudgment could be fatal. Finally, Maya detected a change in the rhythm of the pulses, slightly faster, almost imperceptibly. Dawson's team had adjusted the beat pattern, signaling movement and urgency. Maya recalculated. The team had shifted eastward, consistent with her previous predictions. The connection, invisible to everyone else, remained unbroken. Echo 7 was alive, moving, and sending hope across thousands of miles through sheer ingenuity and coded precision. Part 2 closes with tension high. Echo 7 remains hidden in the treacherous mountains, navigating ambushes and environmental hazards, while Maya traces their trail through the static. Their survival hinges on timing, skill, and a single analyst's determination. In the darkness of the canyon and the dim glow of monitors in Virginia, the first true threads of hope emerge. But the enemy is relentless, and the mission is far from over. The canyon, once merely a backdrop to Echo 7's mission, had become a trap. Shadows stretched unnaturally long in the fading light, the jagged cliffs swallowing sound and masking movement. Dawson's team had pressed eastward, following the only feasible path, but the insurgents were patient predators. Within moments, the SEALs found themselves surrounded, herded into a narrow gorge where escape seemed impossible. Dawson assessed the situation quickly. His team had fought ambushes before, but this wasn't an isolated attack. It was a carefully orchestrated capture. Every step had been predicted, every route monitored. The insurgents were not only well-trained but equipped with advanced communications jamming and tactical awareness that far exceeded intelligence reports. This was no ordinary militia. They were organized, adaptive, and cruel. The first wave of insurgents approached silently, using the canyon walls to their advantage. Echo 7 attempted evasive maneuvers, slipping behind rocks, signaling each other with hand gestures. A single wrong move could result in death or capture. Yet, despite their skill, the team was gradually cornered. Dawson realized there was no way out in open terrain. Their only chance was to preserve the team and buy time for a rescue they could only hope was. Suddenly, Tors, the communications specialist, whispered a critical update. "They're scanning for signals. Our radios won't work for long." The team understood instantly. Any outgoing transmissions could betray their exact location. Dawson had anticipated this scenario, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. The SEALs moved silently, surrendering only when escape became impossible, their weapons held loosely at first to avoid immediate retaliation. The captors wasted no time. Echo 7 was forced into an underground tunnel network, the entrance cleverly concealed behind jagged boulders. The tunnels were narrow, damp, and labyrinthine, carved decades ago during the Soviet occupation, and now repurposed for concealment. Dawson led the team, eyes scanning every corner, noting structural weaknesses and potential escape points. They were alive, but they were prisoners in hostile territory. In Virginia, Maya Trent detected the subtle changes immediately. The rhythmic pulse from Dawson's vest had altered. Unlike the steady emergency beat she had tracked earlier, the signal now carried an irregular cadence. It was a subtle Morse code, tapping against the internal metal of the tunnel. Her pulse quickened. She had recognized the pattern. This was Echo 7 signaling from captivity, improvising with every ounce of ingenuity at their disposal. Maya's eyes widened as she enhanced the static. The pulse was faint, almost indistinguishable from the noise, but her trained ears and analytical tools extracted the signal with precision. Dawson was using a method taught only to elite operators, passive reflection. Every tap, every pause, communicated location and movement indirectly through interference patterns. It was genius, and it was desperate. Inside the tunnels, Echo 7 was alive but tense. Every step echoed off stone walls. The air was thick, musty, and smelled faintly of decay and damp metal. Guards moved in rotations, but the SEALs observed, memorized their patterns, and communicated silently. Dawson encouraged his team to remain calm, noting that desperation was more dangerous than their captors. Every sound, every shadow, could signal either hope or death. The team was not entirely without resources. Tactical gear remained strapped to their bodies, small knives, emergency tools, and limited medical supplies. Dawson used these to coordinate subtle signals, small knocks, scratches, and the faint tapping of metal against metal. Torres improvised a system to communicate silently between team members, ensuring their movements remained coordinated. Yet the physical toll was apparent. Fatigue, bruises, and minor wounds were beginning to slow reactions. Maya worked tirelessly, correlating every tap she detected with tunnel acoustics and geographical data. She cross-referenced Soviet-era maps of the region with modern satellite imagery, identifying likely tunnel entrances and exits. She could visualize the twists and turns of the underground network without ever leaving her office. Every calculation mattered. A misstep could send rescue forces into the wrong area, risking lives. She knew the stakes. Back in the tunnels, Dawson noticed that one of his team, the medic, was slightly lagging. A shallow wound on his arm had slowed him, and the damp, cold environment exacerbated the discomfort. Dawson discreetly signaled Torres to adjust their rhythm. The pulse needed to maintain clarity for Maya, but also had to account for the medic's movement. It was a delicate balance, signaling for help without drawing attention from the captors. Hours dragged on. Maya's fatigue mirrored that of Echo 7, though she remained glued to the monitors. She applied filters to remove ambient interference and focused on the faintest signal deviations. Through relentless effort, she began piecing together a pattern, a likely path through the tunnels, rotational schedules of the captors, and potential weak points for extraction. Her mind raced, simulating the canyon terrain and tunnel network in real time. Every calculation brought them closer to survival. The insurgents were organized but predictable in some ways. Maya noticed repeated intervals in the background chatter, slight pauses before commands, subtle timing variations. By mapping these against known insurgent behaviors, she identified which tunnels were actively monitored and which were relatively quiet. She could anticipate where Echo 7 would be moved next, a crucial insight for any rescue operation. Inside the tunnels, the SEALs remained vigilant. Dawson's leadership was precise, focusing on morale as much as strategy. He reminded the team that every improvisation mattered, that patience could save them. They rotated positions during guards' brief absences, subtly marking walls, noting tunnel width and ventilation, all while maintaining the illusion of compliance. Each observation could become vital if rescue arrived. As night fell outside the mountains, the silence was broken only by distant water dripping and the faint shuffle of boots. Maya's visualization of the tunnel network had become a detailed map, each node representing a potential exit or choke point. She decoded a new section of Morse code, moving south next chamber. The urgency was palpable. Echo 7 was being relocated, and time was running out. Dawson's team adapted. Each move was deliberate, measured, and coordinated. Even in captivity, they applied their tactical training, understanding that their survival depended not only on physical skill, but on mental resilience. The pulse signal was their lifeline. Maya's decoding it was the only reason hope remained alive. By dawn, Maya had constructed a clear picture of the tunnel network and the team's current location. The coordinates, while approximate, offered a starting point for potential extraction. Echo 7 had survived the night, and their ingenuity, combined with Maya's analytical skill, had kept the mission from ending in tragedy. The connection between analyst and operators had become almost symbiotic. Every tap transmitted, every calculation refined, and every decision echoed across thousands of miles. Part 3 closes with tension at its peak. Echo 7 remains alive but confined, maneuvering through a deadly underground network, while Maya pieces together their path through static and ingenuity. The invisible connection between team and analyst grows stronger, setting the stage for a rescue that hangs on every second, every pulse, every calculated risk. The canyon above and the tunnels below are alive with danger, but hope, fragile yet unyielding, persists. In Virginia, Maya Trent rubbed her eyes, blinking against the harsh glow of her monitors. Outside, the early morning sun filtered through blinds, indifferent to the crisis unfolding in a remote canyon thousands of miles away. Her office was cluttered with half-empty coffee cups, stacks of intelligence reports, and monitors displaying endless streams of intercepted signals. To most of her colleagues, it looked like just another long night, but Maya knew better. Echo 7 was alive, and every pulse of static they transmitted was a lifeline. She had decoded the emergency taps, 3 short, 1 long, repeatedly over hours. The team had hidden their presence ingeniously, using reflective surfaces and metallic gear to amplify their signal in ways she had never encountered. Every variation in frequency was deliberate, every subtle change a message of survival. Maya's supervisor, a seasoned analyst named Harold Kent, frowned at her persistent tracking. "Maya, this is beyond reasonable," he said, exasperated. "Echo 7 has been classified as lost due to temporary comm failure. Your obsession with decoding background noise is, well, it's borderline paranoia." Maya ignored him. She couldn't. Her instincts, honed through years of monitoring signals told her Echo 7's team was sending coded messages, and she knew what that meant. They were alive and in immediate danger. She adjusted her filters, isolating the frequency changes caused by cave walls, shifting metal, and human movement. Each spike, each pulse, revealed a hidden map of the tunnels the SEALs were navigating. Meanwhile in the canyon, Dawson and his team moved cautiously. Every step through the narrow, damp corridors had to be precise. The insurgents were relentless, patrolling every chamber with disciplined rotations. The tunnels echoed with faint dripping water, the shuffle of boots, and the whispered commands of captors. Even in confinement, Echo 7 maintained coordination, improvising a system of taps and knocks to communicate subtle directions and warnings. Tors, crouched behind a support beam, tapped out new sequences. Each beat represented a word, a direction, or a warning. Dawson observed quietly, providing guidance without drawing attention. They had survived ambushes, gunfights, and natural obstacles, but the mental strain of confinement and constant vigilance weighed heavily. Every misstep could result in capture or death. Back at NSA, Maya noticed a new anomaly in the frequency patterns. A faint vibration she hadn't seen before pulsed regularly every 7 seconds. It wasn't just a Morse code pattern. It was the medic's embedded heartbeat sensor, subtly transmitting even under duress. One of the SEALs was wounded and needed immediate attention. Maya felt a surge of urgency. The team's lives depended on her interpretation of these signals. She compiled her analysis, cross-referencing tunnel acoustics, topography, and historical insurgent tactics. She prepared a report for her chain of command, highlighting the risks and emphasizing the urgency. Her supervisor glanced over her shoulder, skeptical. "This is unusual. You're suggesting we can triangulate the team's location based on static?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," Maya replied, her voice steady. "They're using reflections, taps, and environmental feedback to send messages. They're alive but moving, and if we don't act, they could be relocated, or worse. The report reached Colonel Hayes, a veteran who had earned his reputation by trusting unconventional minds. He studied the data, his sharp eyes scanning every waveform and timestamp. "If she's right," he murmured to himself, "then we have a lifeline we can't ignore." He authorized her to continue her independent tracking. In the tunnels, Echo 7's team had noticed the captor's patrol patterns changing. The insurgents seemed aware that something was amiss, though they hadn't identified the source. Dawson realized that maintaining a visible calm and following the improvised communication system was critical. They moved cautiously, marking walls discreetly, noting tunnel dimensions, and memorizing junction points for potential escape. Maya, piecing together the signal anomalies, realized that the team was moving deeper into a Soviet-era tunnel complex, an abandoned network perfect for hiding captives. The complexity of the tunnels made visual reconnaissance impossible, but every vibration, every reflection, and every faint pulse told her exactly how the team was moving. It was as if she could see the path through the walls themselves. She decoded a fragment of the new message. Track, signal, canyon east, moving. The team's location was shifting, but the pulse gave her a directional cue. Maya felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her. Every decision she made could mean life or death for the operators she had never met. She adjusted her models, overlaying real-time satellite imagery, topographic maps, and her filtered signals. Meanwhile, the insurgents shifted their strategy. A small squad entered one of the chambers, searching for concealed messages or signs of escape. Dawson held his breath, signaling the team to remain still. Torres, his hands trembling slightly, kept up the pulse transmission, ensuring that Maya's line of sight remained unbroken. One false movement, one misinterpreted sound, and the team could lose its only lifeline. Hours stretched into tension-filled moments as Maya continued decoding. Her eyes were strained, and her brain felt the weight of every pulse. She realized that the seals were improvising with reflections of light and metal, turning the tunnels into an acoustic signaling device. The ingenuity was extraordinary, and she couldn't help but admire their skill even under extreme duress. Finally, a pattern emerged. Maya identified rotational shifts in the captor's patrols, which gave her precise windows for possible extraction. The signal intensity indicated which tunnels were monitored and which were relatively quiet. She could predict movement, almost as if she were walking the tunnels herself. The combination of Morse taps, reflective signals, and heartbeat pulses allowed her to map Echo 7's location with unprecedented accuracy. Colonel Hayes reviewed her findings. He understood the gravity of the situation. "This is the most precise tracking I've ever seen," he said. "If we're wrong, we risk sending troops into a trap, but if we're right, we can save a team that everyone else thinks is gone." He approved preliminary extraction planning, relying entirely on Maya's interpretation of the static signals. In the tunnels, Dawson assessed the risks of remaining in their current location. The insurgents were alert, rotating patrols unpredictably, but the team had no immediate threats in their immediate chamber. He decided to maintain their pulse transmissions, trusting that someone somewhere was tracking them. Every beat represented hope, a fragile, crucial hope. As night fell over the mountains, the canyon outside was silent again, but the tunnels were alive with tension. Echo 7 moved carefully, conserving energy, observing patterns, and improvising with every subtle movement. Maya, in her office thousands of miles away, mapped each pulse, each vibration, and each reflection. The invisible connection between analyst and operators grew stronger, almost symbiotic. Part 4 ends with a precarious balance. Echo 7 remains trapped, maneuvering carefully under vigilant eyes, while Maya's decoding brings the first clear understanding of their precise location. Command has recognized her skill, and a rescue operation is beginning to take shape, but the team is not yet safe. The suspense deepens, with every pulse representing life, every signal a thread connecting two worlds. The night stretched endlessly in the canyon, a blanket of darkness that concealed both danger and the faint flickers of hope. Echo 7 moved cautiously through the narrow Soviet-era tunnels, every step deliberate, every breath measured. Lieutenant Dawson signaled silently, ensuring that the team stayed in rhythm with their improvised code. The metallic tapping of Tor's vest and the reflective glints from small gear provided subtle signals. Every beat was a breadcrumb, a lifeline reaching across thousands of miles to someone who could hear it, Maya Trent. Maya had spent over 72 hours analyzing the patterns, her fatigue mounting but her focus sharper than ever. She mapped every tap, every deviation, cross-referencing them against topographical data, historical maps, and satellite imagery. The terrain was treacherous, but the team's pulse gave her a virtual map of the tunnels and canyon. The smallest shift in frequency indicated the team's movement through tight passages, hidden chambers, and ventilation shafts. Each calculation was critical. Even a minor error could send rescue forces into deadly traps. Dawson's team had been relocated multiple times, guided by the captor's unpredictable strategies. The insurgents rotated patrols, used decoys, and moved the team through previously unexplored sections of the underground network. Each relocation increased the risk, but it also left subtle markers, slight variations in acoustics, differences in the air pressure, and vibrations that traveled through the rock. To anyone else, these would be insignificant. To Maya, they were a lifeline. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, simulating tunnel acoustics against observed pulse patterns. She noticed a faint low-frequency hum beneath the taps, something she hadn't seen before. After careful filtering, she realized it was the medic's embedded heartbeat sensor. One of the SEALs was injured, bleeding, and their physiological signals were bleeding into the transmission. Maya's chest tightened as she realized the urgency. Time was slipping away, and extraction was not just a priority, it was a race against death. Inside the tunnels, Dawson recognized the subtle risk. The medic's limp was becoming more pronounced, slowing their progress. Every corridor and chamber had to be navigated carefully, avoiding both the enemy and the deteriorating condition of the wounded. The team maintained their pulse transmissions, despite fatigue and physical strain, knowing that Maya was their only connection to the outside world. They trusted her entirely, though they had never met. Every beat she decoded could mean life or failure. Maya triangulated the team's location using multiple signals, each faintly reflected and refracted through rock walls and metal structures. She cross-referenced drone imagery, satellite photographs, and topographic anomalies. Slowly, an invisible trail emerged, a digital breadcrumb path tracing the team's likely route through the maze of tunnels. Her mind worked tirelessly, running simulations to predict the insurgents' moves and the team's responses. She had to anticipate every relocation, every patrol rotation. Every second mattered. Dawson paused in a chamber, crouched low, signaling the team to rest briefly. He studied the map they had memorized, noting junctions and exits. The insurgents were adaptive, but even their skill could be countered with careful observation and patience. He relied on the pulse code to keep Maya informed, knowing that their movements had to be precise, deliberate, and synchronized. Even a momentary lapse could be fatal. Maya noticed the pulse pattern changing again. The team was adjusting, signaling through subtle variations in timing. She decoded the new message. Moving east, new hallway. Her heart raced. The team was heading deeper into the tunnel complex, moving toward a previously identified chamber with an exit potentially leading to an extraction zone. But the enemy was adaptive, and she knew the insurgents would detect any deviation. Every calculation had to consider the unpredictable factor. Hours passed. Maya's eyes were red from strain, but she continued tirelessly, overlaying all data points to build a high-confidence path. She considered atmospheric interference, tunnel acoustics, and rock density. Each faint vibration became part of a larger network of signals she could interpret. Using this method, she narrowed the team's location to a section of the canyon tunnel system almost completely hidden from aerial surveillance. It was a critical breakthrough, the first step toward orchestrating a rescue. Inside the tunnels, the team's morale was fragile but resilient. Dawson encouraged them, reminding everyone that their improvisation mattered. Each reflective signal, each beat of Morse code was an act of defiance, a whisper into the void that someone was listening. The SEALs moved cautiously, noting every minor detail: uneven rock surfaces, slight shifts in air currents, and the captor's patterns. Every observation would later be crucial for extraction. Maya adjusted her simulations again. She incorporated the medic's heartbeat pulse, the reflective metal signals, and the environmental vibrations to generate a high-resolution map of the team's location and movement. Her calculations suggested the insurgents were relocating the team toward a previously mapped abandoned mining shaft, a potential holding site for captives. The data provided a critical window for rescue, but timing was tight. The slightest misstep could doom the operation. Meanwhile, the insurgents had noticed subtle inconsistencies in Echo 7's behavior. They intensified their patrols, checking the chambers more frequently. Dawson realized that any overt attempt to escape now could trigger deadly consequences. The team had to move with precision, using the knowledge of patrol rotations and timing to remain undetected. Every step was synchronized with Maya's decoding of their pulse patterns. Maya's focus sharpened. She identified the window of opportunity, a 10-minute interval when patrols would shift, leaving the section of the tunnel relatively unmonitored. She quickly relayed coordinates and suggested timing to Colonel Hayes, who immediately began assembling a specialized extraction unit. The rescue plan would rely entirely on her decoded map and precise timing. There was no margin for error. Back in the tunnels, Dawson received a faint vibration along the wall, a subtle clue from Tors indicating the next movement. The SEALs advanced carefully, their breathing measured, their attention absolute. Every metal glint, every slight echo was used to coordinate position and maintain the pulse code. The medics struggled but continued to move under Dawson's guidance, aware that their lives depended on every tap. Maya's calculations became increasingly detailed, factoring in the possible routes the captors might take to avoid detection. She predicted that the insurgents would relocate the team deeper into the mine shafts and adjusted the projected extraction point accordingly. Her work had effectively built a digital representation of the enemy's movements and the team's own improvised signals. It was a delicate balance of prediction, calculation, and intuition. As dawn approached, Maya had narrowed the team's location to a precise section of the tunnels near a potential exit. The team was exhausted, the medic's condition worsening, and the captors' patrols more erratic. Yet the invisible line of communication remained intact. Every pulse, every beat, every reflective signal had led to this moment. Dawson signaled the team to halt in a chamber with a narrow air shaft. They crouched silently, knowing that movement could trigger detection. The faintest breeze from outside hinted at daylight, and for the first time in hours, the possibility of extraction felt tangible. Tors tapped out the final code for Maya. Ready, extraction window open. Maya, monitoring the signal, exhaled slowly. She had pieced together the invisible trail through static, environmental vibrations, and coded taps. The coordinates were ready, the pattern confirmed, and the rescue team on standby. The connection between analyst and operators had become a lifeline, a silent symphony of precision, trust, and hope. Part 5 ends with tension and hope entwined. Echo 7 remains alive but still trapped, maneuvering carefully under constant threat, while Maya has finally decoded the full trail, creating a clear path for extraction. Every second counts as the rescue operation prepares to act, and the invisible bond between analyst and SEAL team proves stronger than any obstacle. The first light of dawn barely touched the jagged peaks above the canyon, yet in the narrow tunnels below, Echo 7 moved with cautious precision. Lieutenant Dawson led his team through the damp, dark passages, alert to every sound: the faint scrape of boots, the distant drip of water, the subtle shift of air currents. Every step was calculated. Every gesture was synchronized with the others. They knew that any misstep could trigger a deadly confrontation. Torres tapped the metal buckle on his vest, the faint Morse-like pattern signaling to Maya Trent thousands of miles away. Extraction time approaching. Enemy rotations tight. Dawson signaled the team to maintain silence, nodding the medic's struggle. One wrong move could blow the carefully orchestrated rescue window. The pulse, fragile but precise, was their only line to the outside world. Maya, monitoring the signal from her office at NSA headquarters, watched the frequency fluctuations and vibrations with an almost obsessive focus. Her heart raced as she calculated the team's position relative to topographical data and drone feeds. The tunnel network had numerous exits, most heavily guarded. Only one corridor aligned with her high-confidence trajectory, a narrow, near-abandoned shaft leading to a canyon edge where rescue forces could safely intercept the team. Colonel Hayes coordinated the rescue operation. Special Forces units, helicopters, and drone teams were strategically positioned based on Maya's decoded data. Every movement depended entirely on her precision and the team's pulse transmissions. The slightest delay, the smallest miscalculation, could turn the extraction into a disaster. Hayes gave the order to prepare, understanding the stakes. "Time is short," he said. "Every second counts." Inside the tunnels, the team advanced cautiously. Dawson kept a close eye on the captor's movements, noting subtle shifts in patrol frequency and timing. The insurgents were skilled and adaptive, but Dawson relied on his meticulous observations and the team's unwavering coordination. The medic's limp slowed them slightly, but the team adjusted, providing support and ensuring every step matched the rhythm that Maya depended upon. Maya identified a critical variable. The insurgents were beginning to sense an irregularity in Echo 7's behavior. Patrols had become slightly more frequent, and noises echoed differently through the corridors. The team had to maintain their improvisation perfectly to remain undetected. Maya recalculated, overlaying environmental vibrations with the pulse code, predicting the patrol rotations. She could anticipate their moves even before they happened, effectively guiding a rescue that hadn't yet reached the tunnels. As the team approached the designated extraction point, tension skyrocketed. Dawson noticed a faint change in the tunnel acoustics, footsteps approaching at a distance. The insurgents were checking one of the side corridors, unaware of the main team's planned path. He signaled for the team to halt, pressed them against the walls, and used shadows to their advantage. Torres continued tapping the code for Maya, each beat carrying updates on enemy positions and the medic's status. Maya relayed the information immediately to Colonel Hayes. Helicopters were positioned above the canyon, and drone feeds provided aerial oversight, but the key was timing. The SEALs had to reach the extraction corridor without triggering detection, and the extraction team had to be ready to intercept without exposing themselves to enemy fire. Maya's calculations gave them a 10-minute window, precisely enough to execute the plan if everything went perfectly. The insurgents' movements shifted. A squad entered a side chamber near the corridor the team needed to pass through. Dawson froze, weighing the risk. He instructed the team to wait, hearts pounding, muscles tense. Every second felt like an eternity, every breath potentially fatal. The team relied on silent signals, subtle movements, and the pulse code to maintain coordination. Torres tapped carefully, ensuring the frequency remained intact for Maya. Maya observed the irregularities in the signal and adjusted. She knew that if the team paused too long, the captors might detect the pattern and change their rotation. Time was collapsing like a wave, every second increasing risk. Her voice, calm but insistent, transmitted instructions to Colonel Hayes, who relayed tactical guidance to the units poised for extraction. The window was narrowing, and the rescue was a race against both the insurgents and time itself. Inside the tunnels, the team moved again. Dawson led them through a narrow shaft, walls scraping their shoulders, echoing each subtle movement. The medics struggled, but each operator provided support, ensuring no one lagged behind. The insurgents were near, patrolling strategically, but the team remained hidden in shadows, moving in near-perfect silence. Every step, every tap, every reflective signal kept Maya informed. Above the canyon, helicopters hovered silently, engines masked by terrain. Drone feeds provided a real-time overview of insurgent positions near the surface. Colonel Hayes directed the units with precision, following the digital map Maya had created from static, pulses, and environmental vibrations. The extraction point was secured, but only momentarily. Any misstep could reveal both the team and the rescue units. Suddenly, the insurgents detected faint noise, a scrape against metal from one of the operators. Dawson froze, signaling the team to halt. The insurgents paused, listening. For a moment, everything hung in the balance, silence absolute, the pulse code continuing beneath Maya's scrutiny. She recognized the subtle adjustment immediately, recalculated the patrol patterns, and directed the extraction team to adjust their approach. Every heartbeat mattered. The SEALs resumed movement, slipping past the last patrol unnoticed. Dawson led the team into a narrow corridor leading upward toward the canyon edge. Dust and faint sunlight filtered through cracks above, offering the first sign of freedom in hours. Tours tapped rapidly, signaling Maya. Almost there. Extraction point reached, awaiting your call. Maya exhaled and transmitted the final coordinates and confirmation to Colonel Hayes. The rescue teams moved with precision, silently inserting near the canyon edge. Helicopter blades hummed softly in the distance, ready to extract the team once they reached the surface. The SEALs, exhausted and tense, advanced with measured urgency. Every step forward was critical, every pulse essential. The insurgents, unaware, continued patrolling below and to the sides. Dawson calculated the remaining distance, considering every obstacle, loose rocks, narrow passages, and potential enemy detection points. The medic's condition worsened, but the team moved in synchrony, covering each other's vulnerabilities, improvising as trained. Maya monitored the pulse code like a hawk. She could see the team's final movements through subtle variations in rhythm. Adjustments were made instantaneously, recalculating extraction paths and potential contingencies. Her analysis had become a real-time lifeline, translating invisible signals into actionable intelligence. Finally, the narrow shaft opened into a small chamber near the canyon's edge. Light filtered in, illuminating the team's exhausted faces. Dawson signaled the team to remain calm and wait for the extraction units. Seconds stretched into eternity as helicopters descended, ropes dropped, and special forces prepared for rapid insertion. Maya's pulse readings indicated the team's exact positions, enabling perfect coordination. Dawson led his team forward cautiously. The insurgents were still nearby, but the team's stealth and Maya's guidance provided the advantage. Operators moved in unison, guided by signals and environmental awareness. One by one, the SEALs climbed ropes into awaiting helicopters. The medic received additional support, and every move was synchronized with aerial observation. Maya, watching from her office thousands of miles away, allowed herself a brief exhale. The invisible thread of communication had held. Every pulse, every tap, every beat had been a lifeline through chaos and darkness. The rescue was, and Echo 7, battered but alive, was finally on the cusp of freedom. As the helicopters lifted from the canyon, the insurgents scattered in confusion. The team, exhausted and relieved, looked down at the tunnels that had held them captive for hours. Dawson tapped a reflective metal buckle in gratitude, not just for survival but for Maya, the analyst who had tracked them through the static. She had become their unseen guide, their lifeline in the dark, and the difference between life and death. Part 6 ends with high stakes resolved temporarily. Echo 7 reaches the extraction point, the rescue mission is, and Maya's decoding has proven critical. The tension remains for final obstacles and safe extraction, setting the stage for the closing parts of the story. The helicopters hovered above the jagged canyon, blades chopping through the thin morning air, throwing clouds of dust and debris into the abyss below. Echo 7 was on the ropes, their gloved hands gripping tightly as they ascended from the narrow tunnel opening. Every movement was synchronized, silent signals exchanged between operators as they climbed, aware that any sudden noise could alert the insurgents lurking below. The extraction had begun, but danger was far from over. Lieutenant Dawson led the climb, glancing over each shoulder. His team's faces were pale, sweat mingled with dirt, bruises visible in the early light. The medic, weak but determined, relied on the team's support. The insurgents were aware of the helicopters now. Voices echoed from the canyon floor, shouts mingling with the crack of small arms fire. Dawson knew the final seconds were critical. One wrong move could undo all the work, all the calculations, all the pulses that had guided them here. Maya Trent, thousands of miles away, monitored every pulse of static through her sophisticated filters. The team's metal signals, their heartbeat variations, and reflective taps all transmitted in near real time. A faint deviation appeared, a subtle tremor in the code. Maya's fingers flew over the keyboard, recalculating wind speeds, rotor downdrafts, and potential insurgent positions. "They're being flanked," she murmured, translating the shift into actionable coordinates for the extraction team. Colonel Hayes, on the canyon rim, received her instructions instantly. Ground units moved stealthily to cover the helicopter's flanks. Every soldier knew the terrain intimately. The canyon walls provided cover for both sides. Sniper teams and special forces operators positioned themselves at critical points, ready to neutralize insurgent threats while keeping the team safe. Timing and precision were everything. The window of opportunity was narrow, and the enemy was closing in. The insurgents began firing sporadically, bullets ricocheting off canyon walls, sending clouds of dust into the air. Dawson signaled the team to keep moving, to climb quickly yet carefully. Torres tapped lightly on his vest, signaling Maya. "Enemy approaching West Ridge. Adjust path." Maya recalculated instantly, providing vector updates to the helicopters. The pilots responded with tight maneuvers, keeping rotor wash precise to avoid knocking the seals off the ropes. Inside the helicopter, extraction operators secured the first members of the team. The medic was lifted carefully, with Dawson and Torres providing balance on either side. Every second was a heartbeat of suspense, the insurgents' gunfire growing more intense, echoing off the canyon walls. Maya's pulse readings indicated a possible shift in insurgent movements, a weak point near the ridge that the helicopters could exploit. She transmitted the coordinates with urgent clarity. The SEALs advanced upward along the ropes, their muscles screaming from exhaustion and tension. Dawson scanned constantly, counting insurgents, estimating firepower, and coordinating subtle hand signals with the pilots. The first extraction lift was successful, but more remained on the ropes, each operator a target in the deadly crossfire. Dust and smoke blurred the line between canyon and sky, forcing pilots to rely on Maya's virtual map and the ground team's reconnaissance. From her office, Maya held her breath. She adjusted frequencies, amplified faint reflections of metal against stone, and predicted enemy movements with split-second precision. Every pulse represented a human life. Every subtle deviation could mean disaster. Her mind raced as she sent final instructions to the extraction teams, telling them where to hover, when to adjust altitude, and which approach angles would minimize exposure to hostile fire. Below, insurgents attempted to flank the canyon ridge. Small squads moved stealthily, their boots barely making noise against the rocky terrain. One squad took aim at the descending SEALs. Dawson noticed the movement immediately and shouted a coded warning. Torres tapped rapidly, sending an emergency pulse to Maya. "Flank south. Immediate danger." Maya calculated the trajectories of bullets and rotor wash, adjusting the helicopter positions to give the SEALs a safer ascent path. The helicopters shifted slightly, their blades throwing up powerful gusts that knocked insurgents off balance. Sniper teams on the canyon rim neutralized key threats, covering the SEALs' ascent. Each operator climbed with unyielding focus, muscles burning from the strain. The medic, pale but resilient, held tight, trusting in the coordination between her team and the unseen analyst guiding them from thousands of miles away. A sudden explosion echoed through the canyon, a remote detonated charge by insurgents attempting to block an escape route. Dust and debris surged, threatening to sever the ropes. Dawson reacted instantly, stabilizing the medic and signaling the team to shift slightly left. The helicopters banked in response, blades slicing the air with precision. Maya recalculated trajectories in real time, her mind racing to anticipate every hazard. "Almost there," Dawson muttered, his voice tight but controlled. The extraction point above the canyon rim was now visible, a small clearing where rescue teams waited. Every operator knew the stakes. Any misstep could send them tumbling into the rocky canyon below. Torres tapped once more, signaling Maya. Last pull, final approach. The helicopters moved closer, their rotors kicking up clouds of dust and loose stones. The insurgents, realizing the team's imminent extraction, intensified fire. Shots ricocheted unpredictably, sparking near helicopter skids and around dangling ropes. Dawson remained calm, guiding each operator with short commands, while the pilots maneuvered with flawless precision, relying entirely on Maya's real-time updates. One by one, the SEALs reached the helicopters. The medic was lifted last, with Dawson ensuring every strap and rope was secure. As the helicopter ascended, insurgents fired blindly into the air, their frustration mounting. Ground units and snipers provided suppressing fire, keeping the escape route viable. The canyon, which had trapped them for hours, now bore witness to their final, daring ascent. Maya exhaled slowly, her pulse finally beginning to steady. She watched the virtual map as the helicopters lifted from the canyon rim. Every pulse, every tap, every calculated signal had aligned perfectly. The extraction was almost complete, and the team that had vanished behind enemy lines was now airborne, safe, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Colonel Hayes allowed himself a rare smile, turning to his team on the ground. "They're out," he said simply, "all thanks to the Analyst. She tracked them through the static, guided the extraction, and saved lives." His words carried weight, acknowledging a contribution that had been invisible but critical. Dawson, suspended briefly in the helicopter, looked down at the canyon below. The tunnels that had held them captive now disappeared beneath the shadows, a testament to both danger and resilience. He tapped his reflective buckle once more, an unspoken gesture of gratitude to Maya, the unseen lifeline who had kept them alive. As the helicopters ascended over the canyon, leaving the insurgents behind, the SEALs allowed themselves brief relief. Every scar, every bruise, every pulse of fear began to fade in the face of survival. Yet in the minds of the team, they knew the war wasn't over. The mission had changed. The enemy still lurked, and every decision they had made had been a delicate balance between life and death. Part 7 ends with the most intense action yet. Echo 7 is finally being lifted from the canyon under hostile fire. Maya's decoding remains critical, and the team's survival owes everything to the synchronization between analysts and operators. The stage is set for final reflection, aftermath, and the recognition of courage in Part 8. The helicopters cleared the jagged canyon rim, ascending above the dust and chaos that had consumed the SEAL team for hours. Echo 7, battered but alive, sat strapped securely within the aircraft, their faces pale and streaked with grime, yet alive with relief. Lieutenant Dawson's eyes scanned the horizon, still alert for any sign of insurgent retaliation. Though the immediate danger had passed, every member of the team knew that survival in hostile territory demanded vigilance until they were fully out of reach. The medic, finally able to relax, exhaled deeply, leaning back against the harness. I thought we were done for," he admitted, voice hoarse from stress and exertion. Torres, sitting beside him, gave a faint, tired smile. "We were counting on someone somewhere," he said, nodding subtly to the communication wrist device that had transmitted their coded pulses. Dawson followed their gaze, tapping the reflective metal buckle on his chest, the signal they had relied upon, an invisible thread that had connected them to hope. Thousands of miles away in Virginia, Maya Trent watched the helicopter's path on her monitor. Her pulse quickened as she observed each subtle adjustment in altitude, trajectory, and rotor angle. Every calculation had been crucial, timing the lift to avoid enemy fire, predicting shifts in the canyon winds, and ensuring that the extraction teams remained concealed until the seals were safe. Her hands shook slightly as the final coordinate confirmed the safe flight path out of hostile territory. She had guided lives through a labyrinth of darkness without ever stepping foot in the canyon. Colonel Hayes leaned over the shoulder of the field operators tracking the extraction from the rim. "They're clear," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of relief. The SEAL's ascent had been precise, coordinated perfectly with Maya's decoded signals. Hayes took a moment to acknowledge her role, an analyst who had worked tirelessly through static Morse code and reflected vibrations to save lives. "Tell her she did it," he said simply. "She's part of this team now, whether she knows it or not." In the helicopter, Dawson allowed himself a rare smile. He looked at Tors, then at the medic, then back at the canyon below. The tunnels, once a prison, now seemed distant, a reminder of ingenuity, patience, and the value of unseen allies. "We owe her," Dawson murmured. Tors nodded, tapping the reflective buckle on his vest, a silent tribute to Maya Trent. The team had survived, but the ordeal had left marks. Physical scars, yes, but mental ones too, etched in memory like the tunnels themselves. As the aircraft flew toward the safe zone, Maya coordinated with the extraction team to provide secure landing instructions. Even after the immediate threat had passed, precision mattered. The SEALs had to disembark safely, evade potential pursuit, and reach secure medical evaluation zones. Her monitoring ensured that every movement remained smooth, minimizing exposure and risk. In essence, she remained a guardian from afar, her analysis bridging the gap between remote intelligence and real-world execution. Finally, the helicopters reached the secure base. SEALs exited one by one, fatigue evident in their every movement. Medical teams moved quickly to assess the medic's injuries, providing rapid treatment. Dawson, first out, surveyed the team, relieved yet vigilant. "Everyone accounted for?" he asked. A chorus of affirmative murmurs followed, confirming what they had all feared might not be possible: survival. Maya's console lit up with data confirming each SEAL's safe landing. She leaned back in her chair, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline for the first time in days. Her eyes scanned the waveforms and signals she had monitored, ensuring nothing had been missed. In a moment of quiet reflection, she realized the enormity of what had transpired. A team that vanished behind enemy lines had been tracked and rescued, guided entirely through her interpretation of invisible signals. It was a victory of intellect, precision, and trust. Back at the base, Colonel Hayes addressed the team. "What you accomplished out there was extraordinary," he said. "But let's not forget the invisible hand that guided you, the analyst who tracked every movement, every pulse, every subtle signal that kept you alive." He gestured to a communications officer who carried the message to Maya. The SEALs, still weary but alert, nodded in acknowledgement. Every member of Echo 7 understood the truth. Maya Trent had been as critical to their survival as any weapon or tactic in their arsenal. In a quiet debriefing room later, Dawson spoke directly to Maya via secured video link. "We owe our lives to you," he said. "Without your decoding, without your patience and insight, none of us would be here." Tors added, "You were with us every step of the way, even if we couldn't see you." The medic, once pale and worn, managed a weak smile. "You saved more than our lives, you saved our team." Maya, fatigued but glowing with the rare satisfaction of accomplishment, simply nodded. Words felt inadequate in capturing the weight of what had transpired. The aftermath rippled beyond the immediate team. Maya's methods, decoding through environmental signals, taps, and reflective metal pulses, were studied, refined, and integrated into future operations. She became recognized not only as an analyst but as a pioneer, demonstrating the power of intellect in tandem with bravery. Echo 7's survival became a case study in the seamless connection between analysts and operators, showing how unseen efforts can tip the scales between life and death. Dawson's team returned to a formal debrief, where medals and commendations awaited. Yet the first recognition went, fittingly, to Maya Trent. She received the award remotely, through the very communications network that had saved the SEALs, symbolizing the invisible but critical link she had maintained. Her calm voice, precise calculations, and tireless attention to detail had transformed static into survival. As the SEALs recovered, they reflected on the ordeal. The canyon, the tunnels, the moments of tension and near disaster, all had tested their limits. Yet, through strategy, patience, and trust in an unseen analyst, they had prevailed. They would never forget the Morse-like taps, the reflective signals, and the guiding presence that had followed them through every dark corridor. Months later, Echo 7 gathered for a quiet reunion, recounting the mission, the moments of peril, and the critical decisions that had kept them alive. They toasted to survival, camaraderie, and the unseen hand that had guided them, Maya Trent. Their story became a symbol, not just of courage in the field, but of the often overlooked power of analysis, precision, and trust. Maya in her office smiled quietly at the recognition. She had tracked pulses through static, decoded invisible signals, and guided heroes through impossible circumstances. Yet she remained humble, knowing the mission's success was a testament to teamwork, coordination, and the fragile thread that connects intellect with action. The SEALs were safe, the mission was a success, and the story, a tale of ingenuity, courage, and trust, would be remembered for years to come. Part 8 concludes with resolution. Echo 7 is safely extracted, Maya's role is recognized, and the aftermath underscores the power of intellect, coordination, and silent heroism. The mission, though harrowing, demonstrates that survival often depends on the unseen, the calculated, and the persistent.